And the problem that I see is that we're so inclined to say that you can do both, right? You want to be of great quality, but you see other people doing discounts and sales like, Black Friday or whatever else, and feel like, oh man, I have to jump in on this thing. And when it gets just this muddled problem that people don't know how to sort you in their mind.
Right.
And that adds cognitive pressure that can just make it so it's harder to buy from you.
Welcome to the Full Funnel Freedom Podcast. If you are listening to this, you are likely leading a team responsible for generating revenue. Purpose of Full Funnel Freedom is to support people like yourself and keep your funnels consistently, reliably full. Welcome to the Full Funnel Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Hamish. Today is a very, very special episode because we have our first returning guest. That guest is Melina Palmer, a globally celebrated keynote speaker showing companies how they can easily get customers to buy and employees to buy in by leveraging the power of behavioral economics. She's the CEO of The Brainy Business, which provides behavioral economics training and consulting to businesses of all sizes from around the world. Her podcast, The Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy, has downloads in over 170 countries and is used as a resource for teaching applied behavioral economics for many universities and businesses, and is also the source of most of my reading material. Her first book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, published in 2021, won first place in the Chanticleer International Book Awards in its category, of which her second book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, published in 2022, was also a finalist. Her highly anticipated third book, The Truth About Pricing, is scheduled to be published tomorrow, January 2024. I highly recommend that you all go out and get a copy. Melina, welcome back to Full Funnel Freedom.
Oh, thank you so much. I am delighted and honored to be the first repeat guest of the show.
So, Melina, The Truth About Pricing, I had a chance to read I refer to them as beta versions of the book. And as I was sharing with you, I was prepping. I wasn't trying to. I was prepping for today, and I kept writing down questions. And I was like, no, we have like a 30-minute episode, so I got to cut it short. So I will ask you towards the end of our episode to tell us more about The Truth About Pricing. Where I would like to start is a place that I understand from listening to your podcast is a bit of a passion area of yours, and that is around time discounting. So, as it relates to pricing and when leaders are looking at their pricing, how does time discounting apply? And by the way, what is time discounting for members of the audience who might not be familiar with that phrase?
Oh, yeah. So time discounting, as you know, like you said, is one of my very favorite concepts. I like to call it the I'll start Monday effect. And so in that way, we say it and you're like, okay, I know where we're going here, right? So relatable example being it's Saturday night, you've had that extra glass of wine or piece of cake or whatever it is. And you say, oh man, this is it. This is the last one. And then come Monday, I'm starting the diet and the exercise routine, right? Totally. And maybe you spend Sunday getting everything prepped and you find your half marathon training schedule and you see that you need to start running. You need to get up at 5 a.m. on Monday and you go to bed Sunday night, setting your alarm, feeling awesome. And then the alarm goes off and don't exactly feel like the same person anymore. And go, I obviously didn't sleep well last night, and I need to start the new me feeling really refreshed. I'm going to snooze today, take a me day. Tomorrow, the running begins.
Absolutely.
Right. And so what research shows is that we actually, when we think about ourselves in the future, the brain lights up as if we're thinking or talking about a completely different person. So in this case, committing tomorrow, Melina, future Melina, Monday Melina to get up and run is super easy for me to do because it's not me, right? It's easy. And so when the alarm goes off, I realize, oh, I'm supposed to do that thing. I hate that idea. And I want to put it off. And even if it's hitting the snooze for 5 minutes or whatever it is, it's still for future me. And that comes into pricing in a really interesting way, in that pricing is kind of a scary thing for people. There's this layering of it being, if I get it wrong, people may not buy from me and everything could go bad. We put a lot of pressure on pricing. And so when you have time, it's really easy to sit and think about, oh, like I'm going to research this and I'm going to do that. I'm going to invest all this time and we can do this big dreaming. This really combines with another concept, which is called bike shedding, which when we have, it's also Parkinson's law of triviality. You can spend a lot of time productively procrastinating on things that don't matter. And then there's this funny thing that happens. So you spend maybe 6 months or even a year just sort of thinking about how tomorrow you're going to do this work. And then one day you wake up and go, oh no, the launch is Friday and we haven't done the pricing yet. And then you have this really hard shift and realize that you're in panic mode. You have to do something. So you pick a price out of the air. Most common things I see is that like $1 less than the competition or a percentage markup over the costs that you know about and that are obvious to you, which is never factoring in everything that you should. Of
course.
Make a vow, that after the launch, a few months from now, when there's more time, we'll revisit and fix the pricing. We just need to get through the launch. But again, time discounting, and it never really happens. So that really is the crux of why I wrote The Truth About Pricing, to help people to not become a victim to that time discounting, bike shedding problem. And even if you're getting close to the end and you realize, oh no, I have a chapter that's called If You're in a Rush.
Yes.
Because I understand how this always happens.
And I certainly appreciated that from, the other me who's just like, when you said research, I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. I just spin the big wheel of pricing and whatever it lands on is kind of what we're at. Right.
Right.
So there's more detail on time discounting in the book, which again, I recommend all of the listeners pick up. The next thing that I'd love to hear more about for our audience is the quality versus value business. And this ties into that, like, or should it be 99 cents? Should it end in a 5? Like all of that. So based on the research, like quality business pricing, value business pricing, like what should we be thinking about in that context?
Yeah. So in this book, I introduced this idea, like you said, quality versus value. And there are many, many ways that we could think to classify our businesses, right? And I believe it boils down for most companies, if they're making a decision, and where the line in the sand really should be drawn is if you want to be based on quality or based on value. And a quality business doesn't mean that value doesn't matter and vice versa, right? But the luxuries, the quality based on maybe expertise or being really sustainable, or you're researching, or you're investing a lot in R&D, whatever, that quality side is a different approach, and the psychology of it for a value-based business, one that can still be selling quality items. But if you're looking at being more likely as a bargain, as a discount, taking care of people in a way that is about their wallets, really leading with that, then you want to pick one side or the other. And the problem that I see is that we're so inclined to say that you can do both, right? You want to be of great quality, but you see other people doing discounts and sales like, Black Friday or whatever else, and feel like, oh man, I have to jump in on this thing. And when it gets just this muddled problem that people don't know how to sort you in their mind. Right. And that adds cognitive pressure that can just make it so it's harder to buy from you. So while it can feel difficult to pick a side, I highly recommend that everyone do this. And you saw in the book, it comes up. It's the only thing that, like, at 3 different times, say, like, if you haven't done this, you have to do this right now, right? Because it is easy to put off and really important. So quality businesses are the ones that should typically have a rounded, even type of pricing number. And the value ones are going to be ending in the 9s, the 7s, the 5s. You're going to be rounding down. And that is one of many differences for them. A couple examples, quality side of a business. I give in an example toward the end, I talk about Hermes and the Birkin bag, right?
Yeah.
Or we can think of Maserati, like anything else, right? Rounding down is weird, right? It's not about that. And in many cases, you would have a weird question, or like where Louis Vuitton, like they will never do sales, right?
Right.
And that is a quality sign. And you don't have to be selling that type of luxury good to fit into that category. I talk about Costco on a value side, right? And Costco is an amazing brand. They sell very high quality items, but they're all about saving people, their members, money. And it's about that value proposition. And you feel it in everything in the way their business is set up. And that is the sign of a really good, well-defined business.
I love that. And I will actually say after reading, or while I was reading your book, The Truth About Pricing, I actually did raise our prices because we were at a 9 and I bumped it up to a round number because that's the space that I'm in on my other business. Is we are a value business or a quality business. We bring quality to our clients, and that's what I wanted to project. And I realized I was unintentionally reducing my perception in the eyes of my buyers because of the way that I was structuring the pricing. So something that you mentioned 3 times in the book, you're like, you got to do this. You got to pick. And that can be challenging, right? And I hear this from my clients all the time, like, well, what about this? Like, I get that. Just, you got to plant your flag somewhere. Because if you don't plant your flag, we get into if you're everything to everybody, that cliche. However, something else that you said in the book about customers specifically was generalities are not relatable. So how does that tie into pricing, and how does that speak to us actually understanding our customer and what they're willing and able to invest in our services?
Yeah. So the book itself, just to give a little bit of background here, part 1 is about our brains and how they really work, the behavioral economics and the psychology piece that's really important when we think about pricing. Part 2 breaks it into 6 different categories that we're doing work through. I tried to make this book really applicable for people and just giving you what you need to get the pricing done in a better, stronger way. And then at the end, we do the framework and ways to be applying it. And so one of the chapters in part 2 is about the customer and being able to understand them. And I give an example of method acting, right? And so if we look at our favorite stars and that are just amazing and do that like commanding performance, they make it look easy. They make it look effortless. And the big difference between them and everybody else is prep, right? They know those characters in and out and everything about them, where they're able to say, my character would never do that, right? And we need that for our companies and in an understanding of our customers as well, who they are, what motivates them, the slang terms that they use, the, background, favorite bands, things that shouldn't be important, shouldn't matter for whatever you're selling, are incredibly important when you're thinking about that psychology. And when someone is able to read your text on your website, or they hear you talking about something that you do or what the offer is, and they just go, oh, they get me. That's me. How did they know? That's exactly what I needed right now. It makes it to where buying is so easy. It's not even a question. And that's the whole point. So the truth about pricing, not to give it away, but I think it's page 3, maybe even page 2.
Yes.
It says, hey, the truth about pricing is it's not about the price, right? The exact number is not what matters. You can sell anything for anything that you want. Totally. And I believe I make a good case for that in the book. But understanding where the value is, making it easy for people to buy, where they're just ready and they love it. Price becomes a non-issue. When you don't think about the psychology, that's where people start to ask for discounts and they say it's too expensive and they want 100%. Comparisons and things like that. Whereas when I can feel that value, I'm all in.
100%. And we teach our clients very similar, is like people buy emotionally and justify it intellectually. And when that psychology is there, and yes, you certainly make a great case for selling anything at any price. I'll just say the grilled cheese story for everybody, and you just go get the book and read the grilled cheese story, because that is a great example of how you could sell anything at any price. Let's stay on the customers for a little bit, because I very much appreciated the fact that it wasn't cost plus, or it wasn't $1 less, or any of that kind of stuff. It was like, hey, here's a structure, here's a format, here's how you can really build out your pricing so it resonates with your buyers. And that had to do with weird questions. Now, I misinterpreted weird questions, and I sent you an email about that. What did you mean in the book about asking weird questions of your customers?
Well, I am excited to reveal to you in this moment, no one else will see it written that way, because I changed it in the final version of the book based on your very important feedback. And so I think it just says random questions or strange questions, as it kind of comes throughout. I removed the word weird, I think, from everywhere in the book. So I have an example in the book about, and I have a long list of questions that I've used when I'm doing, qualitative research on behalf of clients or anything along these lines. And one of them, is asking things like, if the company was a make and a model of a car, what would they be and why? Right? Or if they were a Starbucks drink, what would they be and why? Which seems, again, weird, strange, like random, not important, right? Who cares? But I gave an example of one of my clients, and we asked this question, and one of the owners had said they were a Porsche Cayenne because they're like high end and performance, and it's this like really like value or like real great quality piece, right? That's what they were about. And again and again and again in the responses from their customer base, their clients, was that they were a beat up old pickup truck because they're reliable and they're always there when you need them. And that is so telling of the problem and this is a quality and value problem, right? So they're thinking we're a quality services firm. This is what we provide, this great quality. But if they're pricing things on value, they're doing deals for people and making huge disconnect. So at this point, I was able to help my client to look at this problem and realize, okay, we need to pick a path, right? So we are going to say, we want to be the Porsche Cayenne and we want people to see that. So we need to change our pricing structure. We need to change how we talk about what we do and the way we work with clients to make that happen. Or we're just going to embrace that we're a pickup truck and a beat up one at that. And we're going to like go all in on this other side, and being able to pick a path. Both are perfectly fine. They both work very well, but you have to pick one. And typical questions of like, are you satisfied with your service? Do you enjoy working with us? Would you recommend us to somebody? Wouldn't have gotten to that insight. So those weird, random questions are really important to help unlock something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get at.
I love that idea, because ultimately we're not buying our own stuff. Right. And that's something that comes up a lot with entrepreneurs, especially that I work with, is, well, I wouldn't buy it that way. It's like, well, but you're not buying. So if your customers perceive you in this way, as you said, make a choice, and either one is okay. However, make the choice, because if we continue with that cognitive dissonance, it ain't going to go very well for anybody. Sales leaders, AI is here, and it means that sales is evolving. Is your sales team? Download our new guide on AI and sales, and you will learn how to support your sellers in leveraging AI to gain a competitive advantage, communicate more effectively with their buyers, and ultimately sell more with less effort. Go to fullfunnelfreedom.com/AI to get your copy today. That's fullfunnelfreedom.com/AI. Couple of other things that really stood out in the book, and something I've heard you talk about, because I am obviously a fan, the audience hasn't picked up on that yet, is this idea of survivorship bias and the World War II airplanes. And so I love the story, if you would tell it, and then how does that relate to when we do pricing and survivorship bias tying into that?
Yeah. And for anyone who hasn't yet seen it, I highly recommend the TED Talk on this by my friend David McRaney. Really, really awesome one. But in the case of World War II, the Allies are looking for advantages, every little thing you can get, and they're wanting to reinforce their planes in places that's going to help bring more planes and pilots back, because that's very important.
Yes.
And so they decide to analyze the data, look at the planes, and they start plotting where all the bullet holes are and, laying them, over each other to be able to find this kind of map to determine where to reinforce, because there's a reason tanks can't fly, right? We can't reinforce the entire airplane.
Mm-hmm.
So they start looking at all the data, see very obvious clusters, and, initial response being, oh, great, this is where the holes are. That's where we're going to cover it up.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know. Yay, us. And thankfully, and maybe you are like thinking of the flaw in the logic here, maybe not. Maybe the name helps, but in this case, we realize there's a huge data set that is missing, and so understanding that we're missing things that are missing, we need to think about them. Is what about all the planes that didn't make it back? Right, the big gaping spots that on the planes that are here that don't have holes is probably where the other planes took some fire. The cockpit, the engine, some important places. And so thinking about that missing data set, it's very obvious when we put it in this context. In our own work, in our business, it's hard to see what's missing because it's not from our perspective necessarily. And we don't have quite as clear of a grouping around it as like the planes problem that you have here, right? And so anytime that you can be investing more time being thoughtful about who it's for, what they care about, what happens before, what happens after. I spend a lot of time in the book helping people to think about the journey of that user, that customer, whatever you have, in a way that helps you to realize the true end of your experience, the beginning of the experience, and all these little points along the way, the micro moments that really matter, that you can focus attention on, that are going to make a big difference for you in that positive area of lift.
Love it. Thank you for sharing the story and how it relates back to the pricing. And I will recommend to the audience, there's a whole section on implementation, like Melina talked about earlier. So get the book, do the exercise, then read the implementation spot. Melina, I have one more question for you related to my reading of the book, and then a few more questions for you before we wrap up. And they kind of tie together. So one is anchoring, which is a favorite of mine. I actually wrote something about that years ago. And then the other one is about pricing on the website, because this is a huge topic, especially with the SaaS companies that we work with, about pricing on the website. So feel free to talk about them together or separately in any order, but anchoring and pricing on the website is something that I'd love to hear more from you about.
Oh, yeah. I also love anchoring, and it's such a key piece. It's such a simple shift and something that everyone, we pretty much all naturally get this wrong. And so where we feel like you have to start low when you're talking about options and you work your way up to the big thing, right? It feels like that's the right way to do it and how we would want to be sold to or whatever it is. And you like get this and you layer and you add things on. The problem is you're setting a low anchor on the price. This is also the problem, which I mentioned in the book, with putting in like project minimums and being really vocal about your project minimum, where I'm guessing that that's not the amount you want most people to spend. And so if your average project is 10 times that and you're talking so much about a minimum, it's going to make a real big disconnect because you've anchored them on this low number. So the better approach is to set a high anchor. You want to talk about the most expensive thing first. You work your way down, and whatever is the best offer, of which there's lots of work in helping you to formulate that best offer in the book, is that you need to know that it cannot be your most expensive item. So in the book, we go through a process of creating your best offer and then creating its wingman, which that product's job is to help that best offer look good. I show how it can be, it's most often the high anchor, but it doesn't have to be. And I show some examples of how you can use that. But making sure that you start higher than what you want them to buy, it makes that lower, the best offer feel better in comparison, which is the whole point. And so then when it comes to pricing on the website, so the last like meaty chapter of the book, before we get into some other examples and things like that, case studies or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
is about the placement and 3 different ways that you need to think about your pricing that and have examples for, because they're the most common ways you're going to get asked. So there's a chart, there's being able to write it out, which is typically stacked, and maybe if you're pitching in an email or something, and then having a script for if you're going to be talking about it in an audible fashion. And if you have those 3 things ready to go, you're ready for like 98% of the things people are going to ask to see. That preparation also helps people to feel more confident in buying from you because of herding and a lot of other things. So when it comes to pricing on a website, we typically see the chart. We also may see that stacked thing. So think about your anchors there. And in the case of a list, high price at the top. In the case of a chart, it's actually going to be on the right, because we're kind of conditioned to look. People have just built out the charts that way. So that's where that most expensive one should go. Okay. And I think the question you're asking is, do you have to list your prices on your website? Yeah. Should you? And as I say many times in the book, you don't have to do anything. You can do whatever you want, right? And so even if everyone else does, like, you don't ever feel constrained by what everyone else is doing. Your herding brain is going to want to, but you don't have to. There are some things you can do using words like investment, like as you invest in your business, this and this, that helps us to be able to tell it's maybe expensive without saying, hey, it's expensive, don't bug us if you're not going to buy, that sort of thing. So no, you definitely don't have to put the prices on your website. But I recommend people consider it. If it's something that you don't, I think both sides, right? If you never have and no one else does, consider what it might be like if you did. Right. And on the other side, if you always have and it feels like you have to, what if you didn't? Right. What would that look like? How could this be valuable? And consider building out that approach.
I love it. I laughed when you said, you don't have to do anything, because that's actually a recurring talk track with my daughters. Like, Dad, you have to. I'm like, actually, I don't have to do anything. So if you want to say please, or if you want to like phrase that in a different way, I'm happy to go get you like a bowl of popcorn. Just don't tell me I have to do it. And they're like, okay. Yeah. And the therapy fund is open and willing for contributions. So Melina, we have talked a lot about content in the book, The Truth About Pricing, which is again coming out tomorrow. So everyone get your copy. I'd love to give you the opportunity to tell us a bit more about the book. Who's it written for? Who would you recommend? 60-second commercial. Tell us about The Truth About Pricing, please.
I appreciate it. We've talked a lot about it already, but The Truth About Pricing, how to apply behavioral economics so customers buy, is really built for small to mid-sized business owners in the, many millions is fine, right? But it's typically with a large company, I would do the same type of stuff, but they have teams and things like that. So for people who need help with their pricing, that have felt a lack of confidence around their pricing, that want to sell more in a way that's going to convert, and be able to have psychology-backed reasoning for the decisions you're making, and kind of a step-by-step guide to get you there in, really set up as 30 days or less. That's what this book is all about. So I hope people love it.
Amazing. And for listeners who might be thinking, well, you're using a lot of like business to consumer examples and things like that. All of us are selling to human beings, at least for now. That may change. So until we stop selling to human beings, whether you're selling B2B, B2C, B2G, which I just learned, business to government, doesn't matter. There's a human being there, and all of us are wired. And so the concepts and ideas and frameworks that Melina talks about are completely applicable no matter what industry or what vertical you're selling to. So Melina, as always, I could probably speak with you for the whole rest of the day about this and nerd out. One final question for you. You've already given us a ton of great insights, a ton of great wisdom. What is a closing thought or a bit of an additional insight, or maybe something you want to plug that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
I appreciate that. And it's kind of the same of what I always say. And so I guess this will be the second time here. But I end every episode of the Brainy Business podcast with the words to be thoughtful. And so in the case of your pricing, your business, the way you interact with others, to give generously, to think about the decisions you make, working with teammates, whatever it is, a little more thoughtfulness is really important. And I would say, along those lines, I do have a freebie opportunity for everyone who is thinking that this might be a great book for them. And if you're on the fence, you want to check out the first chapter of the book for free, you can go to thebrainybusiness.com/fullfunnelfreedom, and you'll be able to get that first chapter really of any of my books for free if you want to check them out. So hope you do.
Amazing. Thank you. And we'll certainly put that link in the show notes as well. So once again, Melina, I am clearly a big fan. I am grateful for your books and your insights and your podcast. Thank you for being our first returning guest.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Sales leaders, what an amazing conversation with Melina Palmer. Super excited about her book. Clearly, I'm a fan. Hopefully, you didn't feel I was too fanboy today. I genuinely appreciate what she is doing, because I've been a neuroscience and a behavioral economics nerd since my early 20s, and I find her books are very practical, implementable, and very relatable. It's not like reading a Psych 101 textbook. They're very, very readable and very, very implementable. I might have made up both of those last two words. So for me, a few takeaways. Number one is, it's not about us, it's about our buyers. And ultimately, how does our buyer view us? And you might be saying, well, I don't have any buyers right now. I say, okay, well, go interview people who you want to be your buyers. So not just spinning the giant wheel of pricing or doing cost plus or saying, well, let's be X dollars or percentage less than our nearest competitor, because our buyers might not even be comparing us to who we think our competitors are. So we may actually be more than who they think of us as an alternative to. So other thing that I really appreciated about Melina's wisdom was this idea of the future self, setting our future self up for failure. Time discounting is the official name for it. I share with our clients regularly that human beings are great with the past, because everything was better back in the past, right? We're okay with the present, and we suck at the future. So as in Melina's examples, when present Hamish says, oh, future Hamish will take care of that, fast forward, and then all of a sudden, future Hamish has become present Hamish, and now I feel set up for failure because I don't want to go exercise, or I don't want to put the work in to build up the pricing or do the research or whatever that might be. The other key takeaway for me, of which there are many, this idea of anchoring. I know I've made this mistake many times early in my career as a seller, where very early on in a conversation with a buyer, it's way too early to talk about pricing, because aside from knowing that they exist, I really don't know anything about them or their business. And they say, hey, just give me a ballpark. And you spit out a number. And as you're going through qualification, you discover that number does not exist in reality anymore. And so now we have two choices to make. We can either try to fight our buyer up to what the price actually is, like Melina was talking about, or we're going to end up selling $50,000 worth of stuff for $30,000, because that was the anchor that we set our buyer at, and they're not going to go up to 50. So then we either sell them 50 grand of stuff for 30 grand, or we lose the deal. So I'd love to hear what your big takeaways were in the episode in our social media. Until we connect on the next episode, go create full funnel freedom. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Full Funnel Freedom podcast. You can continue to support us by leaving us a review and a rating, sharing this episode with a couple of sales leaders in your network who you care about. I'd love to connect with you. I'm easy to find, Hamish Knox on LinkedIn. Also, if you'd like a free 15-minute call with me, go to www.hamish.sandler.com/how-to-sandler. Until we connect on the next episode, go create full funnel freedom.